The following is a Spirit Street production.
All right, people, look, Big 12 has officially changed hands. Texas and OU are out. Yeah, I know the official date hasn't come yet, but for all intents and purposes, they're out of the conference. The big question is, are they going to be able to be replaced? Yes, Texas and OU are behemoths in the college athletic world. But does the Big 12 have enough to be able to replace them? We'll take a look at that and more. This is the Big 12 Insiders.
Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show, presented by Synergy Financial Partners. Now let's go to booming North Texas, home of Studio 73. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. This is Big B, Brien Hanley, along with Tim Fitzgerald. Fitz, what is going on, my man? How are you doing today?
It's the rainy season in Kansas. Yeah. We're probably going to start growing some palm trees soon. But yeah, things are great. Things are great.
Gotcha. I understand. Look, Big 12, you know, for all intents and purposes, the conference, it's Texas and OU are out.
Right.
Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah, they are in. So for all intents and purposes, here we go with the new conference. So what we're going to talk about today, and my question is, with Texas and OU out, are we going to be able to replace those two? So we'll start with Texas first. What Texas brings to the table, let's just be honest, it's a lot. You know, we don't have to like it, but it's a lot. Number one, it brings a lot of eyeballs to the screen, to the conference. They have a ton of sports, a ton of money, and for the most part, they're pretty successful. Now, national championship successful depends on the sport,
right.
But in the two major ones that we're talking about, yeah, they haven't been. But for Texas, for them to leave, look, we can't deny it. It's a big hole in the Big 12, isn't it, Fitz?
It is. And let's be really honest up front. No, Texas can't be replaced because that Texas brand is massive.
Yeah.
And maybe only matched by Notre Dame in historical size and girth. It's just amazing how many fans are Texas fans.
Right.
Now, the other side of that, Big B, as you know, is they're not always as invested as other fans. They just kind of compensate with a lot of them. It does lead to better TV ratings often, and kind of has also the Notre Dame effect where non-fans watch to see them lose.
Right.
So Texas is one of the cornerstones of college athletics in terms of viewership, just having prestige, even if it doesn't come with a bunch of national titles. Yeah, they've done it in football, within this century, but Texas is also in many sports, not all, they dominate some other sports, an underachiever, and they always have been. But the difference is right now is I think Steve Sarkisian has woken them up in football, and I think they're going to be a national player in the future. They were last year, but I think even more so this year. So the straight up answer is no, you cannot replace Texas unless you would get Notre Dame, which is not happening.
Right.
So you have to kind of do it by, committee. You got to bring in a collection of schools that will bring up the average ratings of the viewership and not some schools that'll just drive them down.
Right. Well, my thing with Texas, look, I think over the big infusion has really come over the last 20, 25 years or so. Texas was always a big name, but you looked at Texas and you thought, okay, yeah, they're good in football, but they're not nationally good in football. Like, they're around and people know about them, but it's like they weren't a big-time player on the national stage. I know people in Texas are going to think, oh, you're crazy. I go, but if you're being honest with yourself, they weren't. I mean, I lived in a part of the country where I grew up, and I knew who Texas was, but Texas wasn't a big deal. Why? Because they literally weren't a big deal. It's been over the last 25 years, which, again, that's where college athletics has kind of taken off, and the money has grown so much over that time period. And there's one thing that I can say, nobody has more money than Texas. They just don't.
Right.
There's a couple of athletic programs that might be up there and capable of competing, but nobody has as much money. as what Texas does.
Right.
You know, and that notoriety, number one, that gets you a lot. You know, when you have the most money, that you're capable of getting a lot, and Texas has a lot. If we just break it down to football and basketball and we keep it there, as far as football is concerned, nobody's going to have the things that Texas had. They're not going to have better, should I say. You know, people are capable, because, again, there's only so much that you can build in a complex. There's only so much that you can put in there, Fitz. There's only so many people that you can put in the stadium. Well, Texas has all of that, you know, so nobody's going to have better facilities than Texas, because if something comes out and it happens to be better, all they're going to do is raise the money and go build it just as good as somebody else. So, you know, and as far as the conference is concerned, yeah, I think that you're right. There's a hole. It can't be, you're not going to be able to replace them. I don't even think you can replace them even with the number of teams. But what you can do is the competition.
Right.
If the competition on the field and on the court can match what Texas does, that can eliminate some of the prestige or the branding issues that you're going to have with them leaving.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And, you know, this conference has always been about being chaotic and on the field, and it's always an open game.
Right.
And there was never a reason for it to be that way in football. Yeah, Oklahoma went for their period where they absolutely dominated. But let's remember, in the early years of the Big 12, that wasn't true. Until they found the name Stoops, they were really struggling for a while. And now Texas seems to have found their way. But as a whole, you just have to kind of start rowing together. Texas, when you talk about on the field, may not be replaceable, but as a partner, yeah, they are. And I always have this somewhat sexist analogy that they're the trophy wife. That it was fun walking into the restaurants with her, but once she decides she wants a divorce, you're like, oh, thank God. You know, let's go find someone better to spend time with.
Right.
And now I mean this in all sincerity, and it's not just a shot. SEC, they're your problem now. And they're a problem, and because they're going to be a bigger problem for you, because they won't be able to get their way. They won't be able to load the conference with votes. They won't be able to tell the commissioner what to do. Now you get to deal with them, and it's not always easy, but the question is it worth it? And the answer typically is yes, but when it's over, it's like, okay, it's time to move on. Thank God.
Right. So with Texas gone, I guess the question is, you know, and again, let's just keep it on the field and the court as far as the place of competition. Texas has found their way in football for sure. Basketball has kind of been a little bit of a different story. Texas has been fairly good, but they haven't really been able to get over that hump per se. I was a person that said last year they had one of the most talented rosters in the country, and they did. I mean, and then you get into the NCAA tournament, and first of all, they struggled. They underachieved all year long last year. And then they get into the NCAA tournament, and it's like they flipped the switch, Fitz, and they figured out, you know what? We have really talented guys. Now, they didn't make the Final Four or anything like that. They ran into a team that happened to be better than them, but Texas was good. I think them going to the SEC is going to be a good thing. Can the Big 12 replace that? Now, on the football side, I know we're talking branding and stuff. Yeah. On the football side, irreplaceable. Just can't do it. On the basketball side, I think they can be replaced, Fitz.
Oh, absolutely. The brand does carry over to basketball, but you're right. It's primarily a football brand.
Right.
And they just haven't been known for basketball. But again, that's Texas. They just kind of cruise. We got the great players. We're just not going to, really try as hard as everyone else. We don't need to. We're wealthy. But yeah, that can be replaced easily in basketball. I think Houston's done it in terms of national power. They don't necessarily bring the local viewership, but now in comes Arizona. And I think that certainly replaces any lost brands in basketball, if there are some. Oklahoma's not one particularly, at least recently. I think Arizona overwhelms that entire area. And Big B, this brings us back to Brett Yormark's basketball play.
Right.
And this discussion emphasizes why he wants to lean into basketball, because you can't replace the football brands.
Nope.
There is literally nothing the Big 12 can do to go grab two schools. Again, Notre Dame's not coming, that will balance out what you lose on the football field.
Right.
Basketball, you can get an Arizona. You can get a UConn in the future if you want it. You can go into the ACC and maybe get some schools that will bring that. And you also have the whole layer of possible basketball only, or I should say non-football expansion with a group of teams such as Gonzaga and Villanova. I mean, that's why he's leaning into it, because what you might lose in the football branding, brother, you can build it right back up and be something unmatched and unmatchable in basketball.
Correct. And I think that's why it's more important than ever, Fitz, that the schools, the conferences, more importantly, get this thing figured out with the NCAA.
Yeah.
And the Big 12 needs that, because the Big 12 is going to need the NCAA tournament to be around and be successful for the Big 12 to be able to lean into this basketball thing. Now, granted, you could always say, well, if they run out and they do something separate and they leave the NCAA behind, all that's fine, well and dandy. But is it going to be the same? Of course it's not going to be the same. And people love March Madness and they love this tournament. So I think it's important that the conferences work together. Now, again, they got to get the NCAA in line and smack them and say, hey, what are you doing? Get your head out of where, and let's get this thing figured out. And I think the Big 12 needs that, just what you said, especially for basketball, to lean into it, because, with football, and we'll get into that a little bit later, they're losing two, blue bloods. You're not going to get that back. You're just not. And you can't create it. I don't care whoever it is in the conference, Utah, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. They could win the next 5 national championships in a row. They are not going to be a blue blood. That's just not going to happen. It takes generations for this to happen. And unfortunately, that's not where this thing is headed. So I think that's the smart play. Obviously, they got to lean into that, lean into the football play. And again, work with the NCAA. Yeah. We know the NCAA is bad, but you got to be able to work with them, because that tournament means everything. Yeah. It just does.
It does. Let's back up. Nebraska, another blue blood, there's no argument against it. They might be struggling now, but they're still a blue blood left. And the conference was okay. The conference didn't fall apart as Nebraska thought it would be without them. And now we're facing the same thing. Texas, less Oklahoma, really believes that the conference cannot be successful or move forward without them. And for you talking about the NCAA has become that dad who sits in his recliner and is surrounded by empty beer cans, and once in a while says, I'm the man, I'm in charge, and then goes back to sleep. It's pretty feckless and useless for everyone else, and it's all grumble, and once in a while they assert their presence, but for the most part the NCAA has been useless, and the NCAA needs to become a partner to the institutions, which it's supposed to be. The institutions technically run it, but now it just seems as if they pick favorites and they do whatever they want to do, and they don't really pay attention to the big stuff. That the bills aren't getting paid, the electricity's getting turned off, but dinner's on the table at time. It's just a mess.
Right. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. On the other side of this, we're going to talk about the OU effect and how OU leaving the conference, how that hole can be or maybe not filled by other participants in the Big 12. One word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial Partners, and we'll be right back.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the vision is to build the world's largest consumer financial education and empowerment company. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right, welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Again, this is Big B, Brien, Hanley with Tim Fitzgerald. So, Fitz, let's talk about the OU effect. OU leaving the conference. Now, you mentioned earlier, as far as when the conference first started, OU, as far as football-wise, was in the absolute toilet. I mean, they were awful. You saw that in all aspects. a lot of guys that from Oklahoma that usually went to Oklahoma. Nobody was going to Oklahoma, and they were just in the pits. Insert Bob Stoops. 2 years later, they win a national championship, and the thing was rolling for the next 15, 20 years. It was absolutely incredible. OU, they're not as good now. We'll see what happens. The SEC said, yeah, come on over here, OU. We're going to load you up on a schedule. It could get ugly for OU this year. If anybody hasn't seen OU schedule, go take a look at that thing. Lord have mercy, is it brutal. If they get to 10 wins, if they get to 8 wins, Brent Venables needs a raise. He needs an absolute raise. Having said that, to me, in my personal opinion, the loss of OU is a bigger deal as far as football playing on the field wise than Texas. Now, the tides have been turning here lately, the last few years, even though OU beat them last year, but the tides have been turning. But if you take it as an overall and as a collective, the loss in football of OU is bigger to me.
Right. If you look over the 27-year landscape of the conference, whatever it is, 28, OU got off to a slow start, but once Bob Stoops rolled into town, they returned to what they were.
Yes.
Literally. I mean, he flipped the switch and kept them there, sustained it for a long period of time. Lincoln Riley kind of did it, but that was when they started to maybe drop off a little bit.
Right.
But, from a Big 12/Big 8 perspective, Oklahoma hurts because they have been a longtime partner and they've weathered the storm alongside, but they kind of latched on to Texas's coattails and went to the SEC, which was smart on their part. But now they're finding out the SEC doesn't give a crap about Oklahoma. They don't. The SEC doesn't care about history. They don't really care about blue bloods. If you can be profitable for the conference, they'll help you out. Look at Texas's schedule. And Oklahoma just got slapped upside the head. I think Oklahoma is going to be the one that regrets this move more, kind of like Nebraska. But they also won't admit the mistake like Nebraska and want to ever come back. But also the Oklahoma brand is a kind of what's the word I want? Myth, isn't as big overall as Texas.
No,
and that's kind of the fulcrum of their rivalry right there. Is Oklahoma is more tangible in success. Texas is more tangible in that aura of greatness that they put off, and the crowd certainly show it. But I do think in football, Oklahoma, if you could get somehow, some way, if he could pull off the Florida State, Clemson, coming to the Big 12, which is a rumor that's been stirred back up, is something apparently is going on with the ACC that hasn't really hit the public airwaves yet. That does replace Oklahoma. I'm sorry if that makes Oklahoma fans mad, but those two programs have kind of been successful in the same period as Oklahoma over recent years, and I think it does make it more survivable.
Yeah, it absolutely would. Look, we love it. I shouldn't say we. I grew up liking Oklahoma. That was my dad's favorite team, watching Oklahoma, in the 80s. And look, they were prominent. I mean, they were one of the best teams in the country every single year, and that's just the truth. So I grew up watching OU football. But I think
you just defined a blue blood, by the way. Your dad in Louisville grew up watching Oklahoma. That's a blue
exactly and that's the whole point. My father, Louisville, Kentucky, loved OU. I mean, that's what blue blood means. That's literally the definition. But for me, I just think OU and Texas, and especially even more so OU, it's perfect for the SEC, right? Because you love football, basketball is just there. And while I know Oklahoma fans are going to say, hold on, we care about basketball. No, you don't. Look at your arena. No, you don't. Yeah, look at that arena and then tell me again that you care about basketball.
About the Thunder.
I hear that, so it's just, I mean, again, that's what the SEC is. Now, you're going to hear some people, well, look at Kentucky. I go, Kentucky's different. That's an outlier in the SEC. For the most part, they don't care. And yes, I know Florida had some success. I go, but they don't care. And you could ask any fan of any school in the SEC right now, Fitz, if it came down to adding 10,000 more seats and winning national championships in football and not having a basketball program, they would all, except for maybe Kentucky, they would all say, you know what? Yeah, we don't need basketball. That's the difference. And that's what OU and Texas are. And for me, I don't miss that because I like to have well-rounded programs, and OU just didn't care. I know they've had some good teams over the years, Fitz. They just didn't care enough for me. And it showed that they didn't care enough. And for me, it was kind of a drag on the conference.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, they've had some up seasons. Lon Kruger did some incredible things there. And the emotional investment doesn't exist in Norman, particularly since the Oklahoma City Thunder rolled into town.
Correct.
That has depreciated the value of both Oklahoma and Oklahoma State basketball in, frankly, immeasurable ways, because it's hurt attendance. It's probably hurt recruiting in some ways because of that. And it's probably hurt a lot in corporate donations and buying blocks of tickets. All that money went to the Thunder. That's why I've always said University of Kansas needs to fight tooth and nail to keep the NBA out of Kansas City, because the Kansas City market is theirs for basketball for the most part. Just the passive fan becomes a KU fan because it's the pseudo NBA team. You get a real NBA team, they're going to see some serious attrition in that, just like Oklahoma has. Again, Oklahoma and Texas are hard to match in football, but easy to replace and vastly upgrade in basketball. And we're back to the Brett Yormark play. He understands that. The Big 12 has an untold, unfathomable upside in basketball, but there just aren't the assets in football that even out the tables the way basketball can continue to rise. You can get better. You can maybe even with the right additions from the ACC get to a place where you feel like you were before, but you're never going to catch up with some of those top brands that have collected, that are consolidating into the SEC and Big Ten in football. That's just a reality.
Right. Here's a good question. Should we even want to do that? Should we even attempt to try to catch up? My thing is, you strive to be the best that you can, understanding that you're never going to catch up, but you never stop trying. Because if you stop trying, that's when bad things start to happen. When you don't try to aspire to be the best, that's when bad things start to happen. I know that I can never get there. I get that. And I accept that. But I'm never going to not try to get there, because if you do, again, the conference will literally fall apart. We saw it with the Pac-12. We're seeing it with the ACC. The same thing will happen to the Big 12. You have to keep going. You have to keep trying. You have to still participate in this thing like you are the big dog, because if you don't, it'll get snatched right out from underneath you.
Okay, I'm apparently the king of metaphors, analogies today, but I'm a World War II. I just soak up everything. And you know what? If the other side has incredible tanks like Germany did, you can try to hold your own in that area, but then you have to win somewhere else, like in the sky. And that's exactly what the Big 12 needs to do with basketball is drive their value up. That kind of equalizes what you're losing on the ground with football. And that becomes very realistic for this conference. And I think people need to understand that. But also, you can win the war with great coordination. Maybe the elite forces aren't the same as your opponents, but maybe your overall army is. And here we go with Daphne. It's going to be interesting to see if the Big 12 can continue to put teams in a competitive position to get into that playoff. K-State, Utah, TCU, Kansas, Iowa State, West Virginia. You just go down the list, man. If you're continually putting teams up there that are competing, that kind of answers the call as best you can hope. Because as soon as Texas gets in the playoff or Oklahoma gets in the playoff, see, you can't match that, even though you have been with other schools maybe being just as effective.
Right. And that's the whole, I don't know what I want to say. the whole demeanor or the whole attitude towards the Big 12 is that it's only Texas and OU, and that's people from the outside, because people that are on the inside, they actually know that teams have been competing with those two, if not better than those two, for the entirety of the conference. Now, has anybody else won a national championship? No, I'm not saying that. But at the same time, don't tell me that these other teams haven't competed. Heck, we just saw it 2 years ago. TCU ended up in the national championship game. Now, whether people like it or not, they were there. They got a spot in the playoff. They won a game, and they got themselves to a national championship game. Yeah. We can go over how it hurt, how that national championship game played out. None the case. They beat Michigan, and they were there. So it can happen, but it just has to happen on a more consistent basis with other teams and getting that respect, because OU and Texas got the benefit of the doubt. And now that they're leaving, who's going to get that benefit of the doubt, Fitz? On whether the team is really good. OU and Texas always got it. No matter what, they got the benefit of the doubt. Hey, you know what? They're pretty good. I know they're in the Big 12, but we know it's OU and Texas. Well, now who gets that benefit of the doubt?
No one. I'm going to argue both sides of the fence here. Utah thinks they're that, and they're tangible in football. There's no doubt, but they don't bring that blue blood status in any way.
No.
They've only been in a power conference for 10, 12 years. They're a really good program, but they don't bring that kind of, oh my gosh, Utah's on, like you do with Oklahoma, even if Oklahoma's 5-6. The benefit of the doubt won't exist. So that means this conference in football has to prove it over and over, and can just kind of slowly raise the bar and make everyone start to realize that, wow, the Big 12 plays pretty good football. I think the key for the conference is to prove that it can play very entertaining football and slowly start to attract viewers based on that entertainment value. Maybe the more casual viewer or the less connected viewer to one team, and that's sports bettors. In the world of Las Vegas, Circa doesn't compete with the big strip properties, but they're competing by leveraging sports betting into something really tangible. I think the Big 12 can look at that and say, this is a pretty good play. Let's be what we can be, not be upset about what we can't be. And I think Brett Yormark brings that to the table. Let's focus on our positives and build those positives and bolster the weaknesses as best we can. But let's really lean into what we are and what we can be and not worry about what we aren't. And now with that said, when I look at the schedule for next year for any school and not see Oklahoma and Texas on it, is a little bit odd. Yeah. It was always kind of the touchstone, we got Texas. So we were instinctively doing it exactly how the national media or fandom views the conference. We kind of did it. Now it just feels odd without having those two schools on the schedules.
Yeah, it's odd that, you're exactly right. You looked at it, we got Texas, we got OU. And now that you don't even have the opportunity, it's like, oh, okay, well, what happened there? So we'll take one final break here before we end the show. Again, thanks everybody for taking the time to watch us today. This is the Big 12 Insiders. We will be back after a word from our sponsor, Synergy Financial Partners.
We'll be right back after these messages from our sponsors.
At Synergy Financial Partners, the mission is to change the way Americans plan for their financial future. Synergy doesn't just offer you a financial plan. At Synergy, the goal is to help you find your best financial future. Learn more at synergyfinancial.com.
Welcome back to the show. Let's return to Studio 73.
All right, welcome back to the Big 12 Insiders. Fitz, not having OU and Texas in the conference, initially, it's going to hurt. It just will. We can't get past that. But I think for just like you had mentioned, the entertainment value and what the conference can bring, I think it'll go a long way this year if the conference has 4 or 5 teams that, number one, are ranked all year long, playing really good football all year long. Now, they're going to get discounted because, again, OU and Texas is not in the conference. How long do you think that that's going to take before that stigma wears off?
A while. And, I don't even know if it can be accomplished in the window before college athletics just turns into professional football, which will put the Big 12 at a horrible weakness.
Right.
That's just the reality. Where I come at this now is if the ACC comes into play. Again, none of us are rooting for that. The Big 12 has faced that annihilation in the past and survived it, and it's horrible. And poor Pac-12's gone through it. We don't wish that, but if that happens, it's the reality, and you have to deal with it. And that includes the Big 12 trying to get new members that move the needle, that improve the conference. But what will Brett Yormark do? This is why Carolina is by far the most valuable brand to the Big 12. Is it's a big school, a big fan base, and a basketball school. Does the Big 12 look at basketball schools ahead of football schools? I'd advise not, because the last tangible football products to come on the table will be the Florida State, Clemson, and onward, maybe even to a lesser extent, Virginia Tech, although their ratings have eroded tremendously. There's a way there to close the gap a little bit in football. If you can pull off getting the big brands, the biggest brands over there. I don't think that's possible, but Brett Yormark doesn't believe in impossible. Or do you just say, hey, let's go to basketball. Let's do basketball. And I'm not a fan of bringing Syracuse in, but that's a basketball brand, even if it's struggling right now. But it's, again, let's see where Brett Yormark goes with this. I think the conference as a whole, though, would like to get as strong in football as possible within this marketplace.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the play. I mean, if things we're talking about actual money and what's running things right now, it's football. I mean, it's always been football, and I think you just got to do your best to get the conference as strong as possible. Bring in again the perceived biggest brands out there, because again, people talk about Miami, but what has Miami really been over the last decade? 15 years. You can go back 15 years. What has Miami actually been? But because we all grew up with Miami being really good, we think, and the perception is that Miami is this great basketball brand or football brand. But even before the 80s, when Miami became good, they were on the verge of shutting the program down. Yep. So even the great Miami is not a blue blood, but we'll see what happens. So
it would help football a lot. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It absolutely would. So appreciate everybody being here and taking the time to come over to the Big 12 Insiders and watching us over here. Again, all the shows are now going to be on the Big 12 Insiders. We are at that $1,000 or 1,000-person subscription. So we appreciate everybody being there and coming over to watch us. Remember, all the comments, likes, all that good stuff, keep filtering those things in, because we need your questions for future shows. That's what we need.
Ask Big Days tomorrow, and we need your questions. If not, we're going to ask our own questions, and that's not as fun. We want to hear from you.
Absolutely. So we appreciate everybody. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.
This has been a GoPowerCat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.